It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker who will be talking to us about why to invest in STEM and FIRST outreach. So please join me in welcoming, wait, sorry. Oh my god, I said that wrong. I'm
That's
so sorry. I'm so
okay.
sorry.
That's okay. I can talk about STEM outreach too if we need to.
I'll try again. It is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker who will be talking about effective FIRST strategies. So please join me in welcoming Karthik from FRC Team 1114 Symbiotics.
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm so excited to be part of 24 Hours of STEM. Thanks to all the teams who put this together. Really pumped to be here. It's a little bit late for me. It's midnight. It's a Saturday morning here. You know, we're doing like the after dark edition. This is the short version of effective FIRST strategies. This is a presentation I've given a lot. I've given it at First Championship. It started off at the University of Waterloo. It's been everywhere. It's been going for 15 years. It turned into internationally recognized TED Talk. And so we're gonna get the short version of it. We're gonna go through it. So let's just jump right in as this is like the most nerve-wracking part, sharing your screen. Let's see if this works. Yes, maybe. Hopefully you're seeing my screen right now. Welcome, Effective FIRST Strategies.
It's working. It's working.
It's working. That's what I like to hear. Thank you. Thanks so much. All right. So I've kind of talked a little bit about what this presentation is, and let's talk a little bit. This is the boring part. That's me. That's not really like super relevant. Sure, I've been doing FIRST for a long time, and in that time, give me 1 second here. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with my slides here. And try that again. There we go. Sorry about that, everyone. Just a little bit of a technical glitch. I've been doing FIRST for a long time. I was the lead mentor from Team 1114 from back when I was in university at the University of Waterloo in 2004, all the way till 2016. Now I'm just kind of an advisor, a backseat driver more so than anything. We've had a lot of success in our time, partially because of the strategies that I'll be talking about in brief today. And we've also had a lot of success off the field, winning the Chairman's Award. We won 51 blue banners, and we're going to catch up to the Cheesy Poops one day. Probably not, actually, because they just keep gaining on us every year. Other cool things I've done, I've given a TED Talk that I've talked about here. It's this whole presentation turned into that TED Talk, which was really, really cool, because this was all designed for FIRST. And it kind of shows that the lessons that we learn in FIRST and in FRC are so applicable in so many other ways. And the fact that that TED Talk became so recognized was just like, I was really just talking about FIRST. So that's kind of cool. And I've done a lot of hosting. I've done TV for ESPN and CBS, hosting robotic specials back with Vex. And I used to work for Vex. I used to be in charge of designing all their games. So all the VRC and Vex IQ games had my stamp on it. And that's kind of a result of how much I love strategy when it comes to robotics competitions, because as a competitor, I was so interested in breaking games down. And then as a game designer, you're doing the opposite. You're designing a game with lots of avenues to be broken down. So that's kind of interesting. Before we dive really into this, to everyone who's watching out there on YouTube, if you have any questions, drop them into chat. It doesn't matter what the questions are about. The questions could be about this presentation. The questions could be about FRC in general. The questions could be about old 1114 robots. The questions could be about the NBA season restarting. If you want to talk about the coronavirus, we can do that. If we want to talk about the current state of politics, we can do that. We can do anything, you know, if you want to talk about fashion. These are all things I'm really interested in. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of time for questions, and hopefully, you know, this will be like it is a championship where there's just like too many questions, I can't even handle them. So we'll see where we go. But it's time to get to the good stuff. This presentation is all going to be centered on a bunch of quotes. And the reason I centered it around these quotes, because I think they're really important. I think we can learn a lot from them, especially in an FRC context. But beyond that, I mean, like, realistically, this presentation is being watched by a lot of young people who are making really important decisions right now in what to do with their lives and where they want to go to school and what they want to do when they're in school, or how they want to finish off high school. And this all applies. This all is a part of it. So enthusiasm is one of the most powerful engines of success. When you do a thing, do it with all your might. Put your whole soul into it. Stamp it with your own personality. Be active, be energetic, be enthusiastic and faithful, and you will accomplish your object. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. I start almost every presentation I give with this. I do a lot of public speaking and motivational speaking, and I do a lot of corporate engagements trying to, pump up sales teams and that stuff. I always start with this quote. Why is this quote so important? I don't know why I'm asking questions. I can't see you. I can't interact with you right now. I don't even see the chat. But anyways, why is this so important? It's because what we do in life, we're so much better at it if we love it and if we are enthusiastic and we're energetic about what we're doing. And when you think about that in the first context, people often ask, why is this team always so good? What's their secret sauce? What's their secret sauce? Like, what's their energy? Like, why are they so good? And there's a lot of factors. And like, some of them are like, yeah, they got, I'll be blunt, I'll be honest, like they have a lot of money or they have some really great mentors. Like that's some of it. But the biggest answer I have for you for why the best teams are consistently the best is it's their team culture. And what about their team culture? Well, there's a lot of things, but one thing is they love they love building a robot. And because of that, they put so much focus into it, because when you truly love something, you'll put more time into it. So when you think about school and what we do in school, you ever notice that you kind of do better in the classes that you like? And some people think it's like you like them because you do well. And that is some of it. But the flip side is you do well because you like them, because you're willing to put in the extra time, because studying doesn't actually feel like study. It doesn't feel like a chore because you're enjoying what you're doing. And why does this matter for our lives? Well, I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of paths you can take when you finish high school, and there's a lot of paths you can take when you finish university. And there's a lot of people directing you in various directions. And so often the comment is, it's like, you need to study something where you'll get a job, or you need to study something, you need to go into engineering because you'll make lots of money. And that's a cool, noble idea. But here's the deal. The engineers who make lots of money, like a lot of money, like they're the ones who love engineering and love what they're doing. If you don't love what you're doing, let's take an example. Let's take like two people, someone who just like absolutely loves, mechanical engineering, and someone who went into mechanical engineering because their parents told them they should, or like, it was the right thing to do. And so the person who loves mechanical engineering, when they're in university, they're going to spend their spare time and they're going to join like the mini Baja team in school, or they're going to join other like various clubs. They're going to be tinkering on their own design projects on the side. They're caddying up swerve drives. They're doing all sorts of stuff. The person who doesn't love mechanical engineering is just going to go through the motions, and they're going to go to class. And like, I'm not saying they're going to slack off or anything. They're going to go to class, they're going to study, and they're going to work hard to get their grades because it's what they're supposed to do. But they're not going to work beyond that. And so then when, the recruiter comes to campus and when they're doing interviews for jobs, the person who just kind of like is about mechanical engineering, they're going to be like, so like, what else? Like, tell me why you think you'd be a good fit at this company. And they're going to give like very generic answers. Well, the person who's really into it and really loves it is going to be talking about, oh, well, I saw some technology that you were working on, and I was working on something really similar in my backyard, and blah. And so it builds that link. When you get to the job world, when you get to the work world, the person who loves their job, loves mechanical engineering, is passionate about it, is enthusiastic about it, at 5 o'clock, they might stay and work a little bit longer. Or on the weekend, they might start reading up on extra things. Well, the person who's just like, it's just a job, guess what? They're 5 o'clock on Friday, they're gone. They're going to go do their own thing. They're going to go pursue their own passions. They might go play the guitar, or they might go, and take a progressive hip hop dance class. That's what they're doing with their spare time, which is cool too. They're pursuing their passion. Except the person who's turned their passion into their career is going to get further ahead. And when they're evaluating promotions or who's going to get raises, it's going to be the one who's more passionate about. So like, this is like really important advice for all of you people out there right now. Follow your passion. Don't be a slave to, I just want to go where the money is. Because the money, where the money is? The money is where your passion is. Now you might be saying, I have no idea what I'm passionate about, Karthik. And that's totally okay. Most people don't know what they're passionate about. Why I really recommend trying lots of different things. When you're on a first team, don't just stick to one area. There's so much about this program. Do different things. When you get to university, you might want to mentor a first team, or you might want to try another program out there. There's like all sorts of things to do. But I really recommend trying a bunch of different things to figure out where your passions are. Read different books, follow different authors, follow different people on Twitter, follow different people on Instagram, learn, see what's out there, go to the library, do stuff, meet people, talk, chat it all up. But this quote is what leads to success. And you really can't forget it. And be very, very wary of people who are trying to push you down a road, because remember, it's your life, you're living it. And our weeks, there's only 168 hours, and you're going to work for like 40, 44 of those hours. That is way too much time to do something you're not passionate about. So, I'm just saying, this is important stuff. When it comes to FRC, the teams that do well are the ones that build this sort of passion. And it's about creating a culture where first is fun, and we're building a robot. It's an exciting thing, and you're looking forward to doing it. And so that's going to tie into a lot of this stuff. But I'm going to jump to the next slide, see where we're at. All right, this is an important one for FRC. Like this one, it's really interesting because when I gave the TED Talk, this was like a very big piece, and lots of people were interested in it. And this was solely based on my time in FRC. And the quote is from the former chairman of FIRST, John Abley. He was also the founder of Boston Scientific, and he runs the Cambridge Institute, which is north of Toronto, which is this great place where you learn all sorts of cool stuff. But it's for businesses to come and network and do interesting things. But he was giving a talk one time to a bunch of corporate executives. No first people. I happened to be there with 1114 because we were running a demonstration there. But this was a talk to a bunch of corporate executives who were there for corporate training. There are two ways to compete in this world. You can drag your opponent down, or you can rise above them. Which is better for society in the long run? I'm pausing right now because I may sneeze at any second, and that's going to be really uncomfortable for everyone here. So like that's why I got this weird look on my face, and it's going to come out, and it's going to distract me until I actually sneeze. It's weird. This quote, what does this mean? I mean, it should be pretty clear, like what the surface meaning is. When you're competing, like if you're running a race, you can run a race where you try and outrun your opponent. Or as you catch up to them, you can grab them by the shirt and grab her, pull her down, and try and beat her. Like that's like the basic way of doing it. Like people think that's a little bit crass, but what's better for our society in the long run? But like, here's the deal. Let's be honest right now. World's kind of a mess. I say this in all these presentations, but it's 2020, and like, it's bad. And like, let's think of one thing that's really, really important right now. We need a vaccine for the coronavirus. We need one. Our society is puttered to a basic stop right now, and we are not going to be able to fully restart until we have a vaccine for the coronavirus, period. So whoever develops the vaccine for the coronavirus, they're going to make a lot of money. That's huge. You're going to need possibly 8 billion or 16 billion doses of this thing. That's just insanity. However, if all the companies who are working on developing a vaccine are all fighting each other, that's counterproductive for our society. We need this vaccine as soon as possible. We need these companies to be sharing information, public trials, put everything out there so people can learn from each other and figure things out and improve what they're working on. We need multiple people coordinating. Imagine if there was like 15 companies who were all working on the same path to try and find this vaccine. Well, that's no good. We need people, we need different paths, we need coordination, we need communication. We need people to try and rise above each other. Yes, it's still a competition. Obviously, each company is going to want to come up with it. That's fine. You can compete, but you have to compete the right way by trying to rise above. This is what I like to term as ethical competition. Ethical competition is the process of competing where you look around and you see what your opponents are doing, you learn from them, you are inspired by them, and you try and outdo them. Traditional competition, and this is, competition has become a dirty word in a lot of places. People are trying to remove it in schools. People are trying to remove it from robotics competitions, and like people say, oh, competition's bad, competition's bad, competition's bad. I'm here to tell you competition is not bad. The old model of competition has problems, but ethical competition is actually really good and something we all need to do, because Life is a competition. You are all competing right now to try and get into the top universities. The job market, oh my goodness, the job market's a mess. But if you want to work at these big companies, if you want to work at Google, or if you want to work at the coolest startup that's got all the best tech stuff, that's the competition. And when you get out into the real world and you're working, you're constantly good. Your company's going to be competing for funding. You're going to be competing for sales. Like that's competition. But I'm here to tell you that the old model of competition doesn't have to be the way. Look at all the things that the world's facing. Climate change. How are we going to solve things like that? We're not doing it the old way. Like when we have these companies, these smartphone companies all fighting each other, all snipping and lawsuit here, lawsuit there, hiding stuff, stealing stuff, like corporate espionage. That's useless to us. That's not the way it's going to be. Like ethical competition matters. And this applies in our individual lives too. And I always talk about this example, but I was in high school once, a long time ago, but whatever. Remember when you're in school, and remember there was that one girl who had the highest marks in school, just the highest marks. And how did people treat her? For the most part, it's always it's oh, well, I bet the only reason she has high marks is because she has no friends and she doesn't study. It's she doesn't even have a boyfriend. She's just a loser. Or that guy who's the quarterback of the football team. It's oh, well, yeah, he's the quarterback of the football team. He's probably on steroids, or the only reason people like him is because he's big. He's probably a moron. Maybe he's not a moron. I don't know. What do you know about these people? But it's so easy when we hear about other people's successes to try and find reasons to drag them down. We make excuses. We try and justify. It's oh, the only reason they're successful is I could have done that, but I could have done that if I had, oh, they must be cheating or whatever. And the thing is, that's a useless attitude because number one, you're probably wrong. You're making assumptions about someone you don't even know. That's just mean. That's not what we need to be doing. You should never be making assumptions about people. Give people the benefit of the doubt until they don't, at least until a point where they don't earn that anymore. But also, even if it is true, what does it do for you? Nothing. Don't make excuses for yourself. The best thing to do is to go up to this girl and just be like, hey, you are killing it. You're awesome. You're getting a 99 in calculus. Can you what are your secrets? What are you doing? And can you help me out a little bit? And you're going to find out that people are willing to help you out and people are willing to share and people are willing to learn because they want to be, what do you think the 24 hours of STEM is? This is people presenting their knowledge and their experience so others can learn from it. And this stuff matters. Why does this apply to FRC? I hope you figured it out by this, but because this happens all the time in FRC. You go to a competition and there is just a team who is just killing it. Let's call them the Beezy Boofs, okay? Team, the Beezy Boofs, and people be like, oh, well, the only reason they're doing so well, their mentors built the robot. Oh, they have so much money, that's why. And it's okay, is that true? I mean, maybe not. But what do you get out of being a jerk? Nothing. First of all, go talk to them. And in first, just if you're wondering why a team is good, go talk to them because guess what? They'll tell you. Oh, teams love to talk about themselves. It's good though. You want to learn from people. Go learn, but also don't drag them down. It's useless to anyone. All the best teams in first at one point were not the best teams in first. And all the mentors who are, who were on top teams, so many of them used to be on bad teams. When I started in first, I was on a team and we were terrible our first year. And I went to championship, and I remember it was 1998, and half my teammates, we got down there. It was our first ever event. It was at Epcot Center. They saw Chief Delphi and Beatty and Wildstein, 47, 71, 111, who were the 254 of that era. And half of them were just oh, well, look at them. They just only have mentors working on the robot. That's gross. If we had mentors doing that, we'd destroy them. Well, the other half of the team was just man, they're so cool. How do we learn? And that's what I did. I just went and talked to people to learn. And I just remember at that point being one day I want to be on a team that's that good. I want people to look at our team as that model and want to come learn from us. And that's the model I took to 1114. And that was our whole thing, where we decided, we picked two teams in specific. We picked Team 67, the hot team, because they were a fellow GM team who helped start 1114 indirectly. And we picked Team 254, the Cheesy Poops, because in our the first year I was with 1114, they just had like just this amazing whole platform going on. And we were like, these are the teams that we want to emulate, and we want to figure out how to be as good as them, you know, and we want to figure out how to beat them. Like, it's not about just like looking up to them from afar. Like, we wanted to beat them, but it wasn't about dragging them down. It wasn't about like, oh man, like they're doing things the wrong way. It's like, they must be doing something right, and I want to learn from that. And so I just urge all of you to compete ethically in whatever you're doing. And this is important because I think a lot of people get this in first. And I think a lot of first, like, we see every year there's new powerhouses popping up out of nowhere. And they're not popping up out of nowhere because most of them have alumni from other teams who've been around and been through the program a lot, or they've learned and they've looked and they've learned. And so like we're seeing good stuff at first. As much as our community can be toxic and negative at times, especially you know, on certain websites or whatever, for the most part, we got like a pretty enriched community. And you go into the business world and it's like, I mean, I've spoken to people who've flat out said that the ideals of gracious professionalism are incompatible with capitalist markets. I've been told specifically, me, that I'm too soft. You know, I was never going to be a winner professionally because I believed in gracious professionalism, competing ethically, because I wasn't willing to lie and cheat and do the dirty things that some companies do. And you know, I took the criticism, and there was a phase in my life where I kind of was like, okay, I guess I have to be more cutthroat. I have to be more cunning, you know, and I just kind of thought back to conversations I had with Woody and all this stuff. It's like, no, that's not who I'm going to be. And I'll tell you this, you can be very successful without exposing these values, and you can build corporate cultures, because I've seen corporations that have cultures that really push ethical competition, especially with young startups now. And it's just so amazing to see these young people who are doing things the right way, and they're forging partnerships with other companies, and they're building the right way, and they're succeeding. It can be done. Now, is it going to be easy? No. Are you going to run into obstacles? Absolutely. I mean, look at the world of politics. You know, there's a lot of dirty stuff that goes out there, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can be ethical. And like, to me, I think there's been a severe deficit in leadership education for decades, centuries, where leadership's been based on this cutthroat idea of like, you have to be tough, you have to be strong, and yeah, it's about, you know, killing all the other competitors so there's no one around, you know, and like destroying companies before they become too big. It's like, if you're established in a field and like a little startup pops up, it's like, okay, let's go kill them, let's undercut them. And it doesn't have to be that way. Can you be successful being unethical and not following this? Absolutely, in the short term. But the long term isn't about how much money you're making. The long term is our society, which is a mess right now. And the long term is like, what's the weather going to look like? I shouldn't say weather. What's the climate going to look like in 50 years? And how are we going to be able to deal with the next pandemic? And we're not doing it as individuals trying to, you know, to upsell PPE, you know, like trying to, you know, to stockpile toilet paper and selling it on the black market. No, that's not the way. And the way like that so many firsters have been donating their time, open sourcing designs. I know one group of alumni up in Ontario, led by Jonathan Norris from Team 610, came up with a COVID intubation box and like open source the design out there. He worked with another first alum, Jigar Solansky from Team 188, to help come up with a design and create this stuff. That's how you solve problems. I'm just talking here. It's so weird doing this presentation without an audience, because I don't know, people might have just been like, oh man, this is, what is this dude talking about? I'm just gonna go play Fortnite or something, you know, or I'm gonna go watch marble racing on YouTube. That's instead, if you're doing that now, that's cool. I might just be talking to myself, but I don't know. I'm really passionate about this. I really believe in this. And I really do think that we talk a lot about changing the world in first. Believing in this and actually being ethical competitors and teaching others about the importance of ethical competition, we can actually change the world. and we can make big things happen. And that's what I want to see. And that's what, you know, Gen Z, you're rock stars. You're doing so much good stuff. And take this information with you and go forward. You're the first generation that really has, lots of studies have shown, well, the millennials got to this, and that you're building on it, about where ethics matter more than money. And this is what this is about, you know, so take this forward and do cool stuff. Okay, next slide. You know, another quote. I'm sure some of you out there are just like, when is he going to start talking about building robots? Spoiler alert, that's not what I do. But I do talk about strategy, and we are going to get into like the most important parts of strategic design. But you can't get there without this quote. We are going to relentlessly chase perfection, knowing full well we will not catch it, because nothing is perfect. But we are going to relentlessly chase it, because in the process, we will catch excellence. I am not remotely interested in just being good. What does this mean? Here's the thing about perfection. It doesn't exist. I mean, in reality, well, it depends on how you define reality. It doesn't exist in the physical world. On paper, sure. Circle, it's perfect. Mathematics, perfect. Mathematics is derived from a series of axioms which were carefully chosen, and everything is built from it. And you can have perfection. You can have a perfect square. You know, there's perfect numbers. There's like the golden ratio. All sorts of beautiful, perfect concepts that don't fully exist in the real world. Things that are really close, like the golden ratio, is replicated in so many different ways. Snails, reproductive cycles of bunnies, all sorts of things. Bunnies are great, by the way. Love bunnies. But the point is, perfection is not a thing. And if you constantly chase perfection and only hope, are only going to be satisfied with perfection, that's dangerous. And perfectionism, I can get into that in a second. It's dangerous. However, if you chase perfection with the understanding that you are not going to catch it, along the way, you're going to become excellent. And it's just kind of like, you know, like if there's someone out there, like let's say you've decided that the unicorn is perfect. To me, unicorns are perfect. Like, oh my goodness, it's a horse, but it's like it's freaking pretty. It's got sparkles. It's got a horn. Like, this is great stuff, you know? I hate to break it to you. You can go around the whole freaking world. You're not going to find a unicorn. But while you're trying to find that unicorn, you will see so much cool stuff. And that's what this is about. This is why we set big goals. This is why we dream big. Because by dreaming big, you may not hit that dream, but along the way, you'll find excellence. And I'm not about just doing things halfway. I'm not interested in just being good. I strive for perfection because I believe that's where you'll find excellence. And that's what I think that all FRC teams should do. Now, be careful. Like, this is not, you need to be reasonable here. Like, you need to understand that you're not going to chase perfection. You're not going to catch it. You still want to chase perfection. You want to chase. Your goal is always to be the best at what you're doing, but you have to understand where your limits are and all that sort of stuff. But then just go for it, and then you'll find greatness along the way. I mean, and this was the story about 1114. Like, when we started, we knew we are always going to chase perfection, but we didn't know how. Did we even dream that one day, we'd be in the first Hall of Fame and 51 blue banners and all this nonsense? No. But like, you just have to keep going. And this is what happens when like you're building your robot. Like, people often ask, you always get questions like, so like, is your robot done? And then some people are like, yeah, it's done. Yeah, it's done. Like, yeah, we got a competition in a day. Like, of course it's done. I don't think that's ever the right answer, especially now that there's no bag. That's a whole other. Because as the moment you say your robot is done and you're not going to try and improve it because it's good enough, that's when you're going to get passed. Because other teams are chasing perfection. And so you just got to keep trying to reach perfection, but you're not going to get to perfection. No one's ever built a perfect first FRC robot. You can look at the best robots of all time. And even 254 in 2018, where they won every match, that robot wasn't perfect. They'll be the first ones to admit it. Ooh, but it was excellent because they just kept on going. Things that impress me the most in FRC is like, especially you see teams who come out in week 1 or week 2, and they just kick some butt. They are just like so good in week 1 or week 2, and everyone's just like, whoa, that robot is ridiculous. But those same teams, they go back to their shop afterwards, and before they've worked on the practice robots, now they think, no bag, you can do what you want. They just kept working because they knew that just winning an early event wasn't enough for them. They wanted to get better, and they knew they had to get better. And this is like a life lesson, where you may be content at some point, where it's like, okay, like I've got to a good place, but if you aren't developing new skills, the world's a scary place. And hey, I'm there. I'm like not young anymore. And now I kind of look, it's like, man, I used to be like super impressive. I'm not actually as impressive anymore. Like people that they're just like a lot of digital natives who just like are just more comfortable in a code-based world than I am. And like I was someone who was like very at the forefront of like data analysis stuff. It's like, okay, I got some catching up to do. And it was because I rested on my laurels. And I should have constantly been chasing perfection, but I stopped. And you can't do that, unless you're okay with the after effects of it. That's a whole philosophical thing. Maybe someone wants to ask a question about that later. But chase perfection, catch excellence. And this is the motto, whether it's the spoken motto, but this is the way that the top FRC teams operate. So again, you want to ask, like, how do I become one of the best teams in the world? Well, you need to be passionate. You need to have a culture of passion and energy. You need to compete ethically and learn from others and try and emulate the best. And you need to chase perfection, but you have to understand you're not catching it, but excellence along the way. Okay, those are my quotes. Well, maybe there's one more at the end, but let's dive in. So I give this presentation. It's called Effective First Strategy. This is like the short version that I'm giving you right now. I have 2 golden rules in that presentation. And I always say that if you're only going to take anything from this presentation, like from the long version, hit the quotes before, but 2 golden rules. So let's go over them right now. Golden rule number 1, always build within your team's limits. You might be looking at me right now and being like, dude, you just talked to us about chasing perfection, but now you're talking about limits, okay? It's like, yes. You're chasing perfection means constantly trying to improve and trying to reach your version of perfection, what you are going to define as perfection. However, we all have limits to what we can do. So you need to evaluate your limits and abilities and figure out where they are. Your limits are defined by people power, budget, and experience. We're talking FRC specific. These are the things that define what you can do. And so you have to figure out what those are. That's hard because it requires some really honest conversations. And sometimes it's tough ones because sometimes you have to say like, hey, like we are not that experienced. We aren't ready for this. Like we need to dial back our limits. It's like we can't afford, we can only afford to spend, $15,000 on our season this year because of coronavirus, and we've lost a bunch of sponsors. So like we need to have some limits in there. And if you don't set limits for yourself, you're going to try and do too much and you're not going to be able to do a good job. So it's about building within your limits. But then how do you figure out how to build within your limits? Like what do you do? Like how do you allot that? So the golden rule number 2 is if your team has 30 units of robot functions and a unit can be valued a maximum of 10 out of 10 or like 0 out of 10, it's better to do 3 things at 10 out of 10 instead of 5 at 6 out of 10. The jack of all trades is the master of none. This is a universal rule, but we're talking about it in the context of first. And basically what this means is you don't need to do everything. Please don't try and do everything. You can't. And you have alliance partners, you have, just focus on a few things and do them really, really well. And if you are like if you have like a huge amount of resources that we've been defined and your limits are like way out there, then maybe you can try and do everything in the game, and maybe you can go for everything, and maybe you can do a swerve drive and a turret and like an over the bumper intake and a color wheel spinner, which will never get used until maybe next year because who knows, the game will change. But these you can't, but if you don't have all those resources, you need to pick and choose. And, like the best teams in the world do this. Like, look at 2056 this year. Everyone considers them one of the best teams in the world, as they should, but they're not, their resources aren't limitless. They have defined limits, and they are so good at knowing where those limits are. And this year they built a tall robot. And a lot of people will probably like, I can't build a tall robot. You can't win without a tall robot. Well, like arguably the second best team in the world over the past 5 years built a tall robot. And trust me, like I've seen the video. They were probably, I think they were maybe the best robot in the world this year. But just saying. And 2019 championship was won by Team 973. Couldn't score high on the rocket. 973 has been great at defining their limits and just saying, no, we're going to skip the top of the rocket because we think we can be the best overall spreading the field scorer if we don't do that. And guess what? They were the number 1 seeded championships in their division, picked 13-23, and then went all the way to win the world championship with a robot that couldn't score high on the rocket. You know how many teams last year were terrible at scoring high on the rocket? They were just all over the place. Those robots that would get to the rock and go, ooh, 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 ooh. It's just a train wreck. But imagine if they had built simpler, and imagine if they gotten rid of one stage of their elevator, and then maybe they could have been really fast at low and middle, and had a few extra pounds, and maybe could have put on like a suction climb, or just could have been better driven. Could have been done earlier. Could have had more time practicing. Could have been done earlier. Could have been doing a 2-disc auto. Could have been doing all sorts of stuff. But there's just this tendency that we have to do everything. And like, I used to give this, I give this presentation a lot. I used to get really frustrated because I'd be like, why aren't teams listening? And I get it. This is contrary to what we see in our school system, because you rarely get an assignment in school where it's like, hey, like get your math exam, there's 10 questions on it. You can't just be like, oh, well, I know I can ace questions 1 through 7. And so I'm just going to focus on those and just ignore questions 8, 9, and 10, because our system doesn't allow for that. You get top out at 70%. Congratulations, you're average. So like it doesn't work that way. But FRC is different. But guess what? And I hate to break this to everyone. The real world does not resemble most classrooms. There's some cutting edge teachers out there who are really doing cool stuff that are trying to make classrooms more like the real world. But like the things that we learned, like that skill set, it's not there. But in the real world, you need to be able to figure out what to do and focus on just a few things. This isn't just FRC advice. When you think about this, especially high school students, there's a tendency to want to try and do everything when you're in school. And you want to obviously get awesome grades. You want to do well in school. You want to keep track of your health. You want to have a lot of friends. You want to do FRC, like you want to do FRC like every day of the week. But you also like might want to play a sport, and you want to be in band because you think you have to have all these extracurriculars. And guess what? At some point, you're going to run yourself ragged. You can't do everything. Just pick a few things and focus on that. And I didn't talk about making priority lists in this presentation. That's a whole other world within effective first strategies. But like in life, your priority list, in my opinion, should be number 1. Like in FRC, your priority lists are almost always drivetrain and then game piece acquisition. And in life, it should be taking care of your health. As a high school student, like taking care of your health, your family is, and then your grades. Those are the top 3, and those it should be universal. But from there, you've got some room. You got some extra bandwidth, hopefully, beyond those 3. Not everyone does. Everyone comes from different circumstances. Not everyone can focus on that. Heck, for some people, unfortunately, the circumstances they are and the way our society is, they don't have the bandwidth for all of them. They can barely keep themselves healthy because they face so many different systematic barriers. We're learning about, like, life is an adventure, and we need to be more empathetic for those people. So don't think I'm saying that I think that everyone should just be able to do those and do other stuff. There's a reason a lot of people don't do extracurriculars like first. They would love to, and it would be great for them if they could, but their resources are tied up in making sure that they can stay healthy and making sure that their family stays healthy and making sure they can just barely get through school. That's an aside. I think you can feel what I'm getting at, but you cannot do every single extracurricular out there, and you got to pick and choose what you want to do. And here's another message for all of you. Like if you're doing FRC and you're starting to feel that FRC is like, or FTC, I haven't talked a lot about FTC, and I should, because I know there's a lot of FTC people in the audience. I love FTC. I got into it this year, and I'm so down. I'm so down with that world. I need to learn more though. If your team is taking so much out of you that your grades are starting to wear, or your relationship with your family is starting to wear, or your health is starting to wear, then you're doing too much, spending too much time on FRC. You need to dial it back. And that's okay. And any good mentor will say that's totally cool. You know what, Sally? It's cool. It's chill. You can dial it back. Like, and we, you still might have a chance to be on the drive team and be a captain, but like we got to figure something out that works for you. If they say no, my way or the highway, you have to put in this much work. Be careful, because they're not looking out for you. Because as mentors, our priority when it comes to the team is your health, your well-being, your grades. And so keep that one in mind. But hey, jack of all trades, master of none. So don't try and do everything. Don't burn yourself out. Don't burn your team out. It's okay to do less. You can still win world championships and do amazing things. Or like, you can set a goal. Like, not everyone needs to be the Cheesy Cruise or 2056, but model yourself after the things they do right, which is like a lot of stuff, but don't necessarily assume that you're going to try and build the same level of resources that they have. It's like, me on a basketball court. Guess what? I'm short. So I'm not gonna go try and dunk, because like that's a limit I'm not gonna be able to do that. But I developed a decent outside shot over my time. Maybe not anymore. And like I can jump for a short dude. I can jump. And so like you just gotta play to your own strengths and your own limits. All right. One more quote, and then we can get into questions. From the great one, the greatest of all time, Michael Jeffrey Jordan. Limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. And now you're going to look at me like I'm crazy. You should look at me like I'm crazy, because I just started telling you about like figuring out what your limits are. So what did MJ mean when he said limits like fears are often just an illusion? Remember, I said you need to set your own limits. You need to figure out what your limits are. But that's something that you have to figure out. Don't let other people tell you what your own limits are. Because guess what? There's a lot of people in this society, they love putting people in boxes. Love doing it because it makes their life easier. They just kind of see what they expect from a person and they say, well, that's what you're going to be. That's who you are. Those limits, like fears, are often just an illusion. Now, sometimes they're not. Sometimes someone has gauged you out and figured out where you are and who you are or whatever. But set your own limits. Figure out where they are on your own, because you know yourself better than anyone. I'm not saying don't listen to anyone. Get advice. That's what mentors are for. That's what friends are for. That's what teachers are for. But don't buy into the limits that other people put out there for you. Because you know what? When I was, 10 years old, all I wanted to do was be like a sports commentator and like one day like be like John Madden or like, be like Bob Costas and like host like the Olympics or whatever. And, or like be on ESPN would have been like a dream. And when I was young, people told me, you're never going to be on TV like that, Karthik. Don't be crazy. Like, how many brown sports commentators are there out there? Kind of sucked hearing that. I kind of bought into it, and like I didn't actually pursue broadcasting. I did the thing, I became a math major, whatever. Still ended up on ESPN. A lot of hard work, a lot of luck, a lot of good fortune being in the right place at the right time, but a lot of hard work. And hey, it was a limit. But like fear, it was an illusion. So that's effective first strategy. It's the short version. You want to see the long version? It's on YouTube in a bunch of different places. Check it out. You want to see the long version? Champs in 2021, if that's a thing, and Canadians can cross the border. I'll be there. I will be giving that presentation. I'm planning on doing it in both cities. Well, it'll be good, or we can just talk right now. But thank you for tuning in. And now, if there are questions, I'm going to try answering them. And my friend Ella is back. Hey, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thank you. Yeah,
Did you enjoy the presentation?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that it was a really good presentation. It was very insightful, and I definitely learned a lot of advice that is applicable to both any FIRST program and also real life. So thank you very much.
No problem. And if we have questions from the chat, I'm happy to answer anything we got until time runs out so we can get to the next presentation.
Yep. So first question, what do you think is a good approach into the next season now that we know the game?
Well, I think the first thing is like, a lot's going to depend on if you played this season or if you didn't play. If you played, I think it's really important to do like a strategic debrief and really look into what went right, what went wrong, and what you want to improve. I think there's going to be, you can't have this conversation without talking about the virus. And so we talked about limits in this presentation and like, you know, what defines our limits. A hard limit next year is going to be the virus for every team. And it's going to be different depending on where you are and what things are going on. You know, what it's going to be in Australia, where you guys are doing, all of you in Australia are doing so amazing. I'm just so proud of all of you. I wish we could be more like Australia here in Canada, where you've got control over this. Or, you know, there's some states, you know, if you're a team in Brazil, you know, or if you're a team in Florida right now, it's like it's looking scary. And what's going to be available is that's like a limit that you have to consider. And constantly be reevaluating, because the world, no one knows what the world's going to look like in August, let alone March. So all that aside, factor in that limit just like you would factor in your budget, factor in your people power, factor in your experience. You've got a wonderful opportunity to look at teams that did really well this year and to try and figure stuff out that they did, and email them, ask them, like, how did you do this? How did you make this work? How did you get this indexer to work so well? And try and emulate stuff that they were doing, but be careful, because there's a tendency, robots always look simpler than they are. And you can go watch what 148 did this year at their first event, 118, where they were just so good. And it would be really easy to be like, oh, we got so much time. We've got all the time in the world. Like, we can definitely copy that robot. And it's like, that stuff's hard. And the key to any robot this year, like, I mean, anyone could have just bought a shooter from Great. Like, the shooters, there was no, like, I shouldn't say there was no, but like, there's not too much secret sauce to a shooter. However, it's the tweaking and adjusting and figuring all that stuff out. So you want to make sure you do get all that stuff right. So going into next season, I think it's like, you know, learn from what's out there, but don't bite. The golden rules really do apply right now. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Don't try and do too much. And then also, I mean, going back to the virus, like, don't push it. Like, your health is just the most important thing here. And, you know, like, follow the public health guidelines in your area. And like, if you're not sure, be a little bit stricter. This is the one where better safe than sorry, you know. And we have an amazing community here in FIRST, and the last thing I would ever want to hear about is like an outbreak starting because of a FIRST team that was spending, you know, that wasn't socially distancing properly. It wasn't wearing masks and wasn't, you know, washing their tools and disinfecting and stuff. So like, just be safe.
Yeah, it's very important during this time, and it is difficult to know what is going to happen. So thank you for that insight.
No problem.
Another question.
Sure.
How do you believe that you can do the max amount of preparation preseason?
Well, I mean, there's different ways to prepare in the preseason. So again, I always talk about self-evaluation, and that's like, you can't solve a problem until you know what problem you're trying to solve. And so when it comes to preparation, you need to know what you're preparing for. It's like, it's more than just saying, oh, I'm preparing for the season. It's about like, what deficiencies are you trying to address? Where do you want to improve, and what do you want to do? So you have to figure out what that is and set a goal. And like, I mean, I just come back to effective first strategies for everything, because you can't try and do too much in the preseason. You have to pick one or two things that you really want to improve on. And so like, you say like, okay, last year I was happy with the robot that we designed, but when we built it, it just wasn't right. It just didn't come together. It's like, I think we need to like work on our manufacturing techniques and work on our assembly techniques. It's like, okay, so then identify that target, and then say, all right, let's pick an old game, and like, let's, you know, find somewhere where like the CAD's already out there. It's, you know, and let's just work on machining. Let's try and make some precision parts and try and, you know, follow a well-defined goal. But it's not going to be uniform. Like, you know, your team is unique and you just got to pick something really specific. So I say the best way to prepare in the off season is to figure out what you want to improve on and then build targets based on that.
Another question.
Sure.
Do you have any advice for encouraging students to adapt to a mindset for engaging and interacting with other teams?
Well, I mean, when you talk about psychological theory, like they like to break us down into two different groups, introverts and extroverts. And for an extrovert, extroverts thrive on contact with people, and they naturally want to just talk to other people. They want to meet new people. It's exciting. It's energetic. I'm a natural extrovert. I love chatting with people. Some people are introverts, and that doesn't mean that they don't like people. That's a misnomer. No, introverts, they sometimes it's a little bit more difficult for them to reach out, and they like alone time and their own breathing space and being able to adapt to things like that. But it doesn't mean they don't value emotional connections and intellectual connections. So I do think that you got to be careful about trying to force a student who's really uncomfortable, into like, hey, go talk to teams or whatever. Because again, if you're not passionate about it, it's not going to work. But I think it's about reminding teams how much can be learned from other teams, and just working with individuals to kind of find what their comfort zone is. And remember, like, one thing that forget about just introverts or extroverts. People just kind of appreciate sometimes, when you're feeling shy about a situation when someone approaches you, and remind people that, like, hey, that team probably has students who are too nervous to talk to other teams as well. So maybe just, try and reach out, and maybe, because like it's very easy to always, when you're looking for someone to talk to on a team, you go to their pits, and it's just easy to latch on to, like the girl who's like clearly the captain and just like is very like, hey, how's it going, everybody? Like, welcome to our team. And that's cool too, but like maybe sometimes reach out to someone who's a little bit shyer and see what they're saying. And if other teams do that, it just kind of builds that bond. But also I think it's important for our teams to make our teams as welcoming as possible to other teams. And just remember that, when you're in the pits, to be like, hey, like, to tell your team, it's like other teams are going to be coming around. And like, if a team is just kind of like, they're nervously standing outside of our pit and it looks like they want to ask a question, just be like, hey, what's up? Is there something I can help you with? That makes it so much easier, So that's my little piece of advice there.
Yeah, communication is just so important in first, and
Oh, yeah.
a lot of people can probably relate to those experiences, so thank you. This is not a first related question, but someone asked it anyway.
Sure.
Do you think that corporations and researchers can put aside their competitive mindsets and instead strive to work together for the good of our world?
I mean, yes, there are some corporations which are doing that. Like, if we're going to ask that in general, I think we have a long way to go. I think we have a long, long way to go. Like, I'm not here to paint a rosy world and say everything's perfect, everything's all flowery. No, we have a lot of companies who their sole goal is profit, and they are scrupulous about that, and they don't care about other externalities. It's about how much money they can make, and if they're going to trash the environment in the process, then so be it. And if they're going to put a bunch of other companies out of business, then so be it. However, I've seen things that encourage me. I've seen the emphasis on ethics and having meaning from your work and caring about the greater good. The millennials and Gen Z possess. I think I've seen changes in how we look at things politically. I think that the past month of protests in the United States has shown that we're ready for a little bit of a shift. And I think that people are open to considering not what just matters to themselves, but what matters to others. So do I think corporations are ready right now? No, but I think it's getting better. And I think there's definitely a path. And I've been really impressed at the pharmaceutical companies, how they've been working together on their journey towards a coronavirus vaccine. Now, I get that it took a global pandemic and 500,000, 400,000 people to die globally for this to happen. And obviously, a lot of people's goals in this are financial, not necessarily like I want to make the most amount of money, but I want to make sure the country's economies and whatever. And so like that's weird, but like we'll tell when it comes to distribution of the vaccine. because it's not just about producing all these units. What's our plan to get these vaccines to, like, okay, so say it gets developed by an American company. What's our plan to get it to Canada and to Australia, to New Zealand? But more so than that, what's our plan to get the vaccine to Uganda and to Sudan and to Thailand? These countries need the vaccine too, and who's paying and what's the plan? And that's going to really be a test for our corporations and our nations to all. Are we going to come together, or is it just going to be a mad grab where everyone's just going to try and get their own? And I hope we do the right thing. And I understand that we all want to protect the people who are closest to us, but with this vaccine, we need with the coronavirus, we need a degree of cooperation for this to work. Because guess what? If everything's great here in Canada and we've stemmed it, and 90% of Canadians are vaccinated, but only 30% of Americans are vaccinated, we're in trouble in Canada, because everything's interconnected in this world. So I'd like to think that corporations are getting better, and I'd like to think that 20 years from now, we have corporations run with the mindset that people are learning in FIRST now, and people are learning by seeing what's going on with these protests and stuff, that maybe we'll be in a better place. But it's going to take time.
Yeah, hopefully people will come to terms with how the world actually is and won't just focus on themselves.
Right.
We have time for one final question in this session.
Sure.
How do you suggest approaching recruitment of new students during the pandemic?
This is a tough one. So I might have an interesting opinion compared to some people, but I think that we might want to take a step back this year from hardcore recruitment. I think we have to understand that this next year is going to be hard for a lot of people. I've lost track of the unemployment stats in the United States, but it's like 20 million people. And that's hard as a kid if your parent or parents have both lost their jobs, and it's hard. You may not be able to do as many extracurriculars. You may not be able to do any extracurriculars or whatever. And recruiting for first teams is hard as is, and when everything's great. And so during the pandemic, I just want to advise teams, like, don't push it. And your team might do a little bit better if it's a little bit smaller next year, because sponsorship dollars might not be there and the such. However, FIRST is a great program, and we want people to have this experience, and we don't want, it's not like I don't want teams to say our doors are closed, but I think it's going to depend on what the restrictions are in each area and what it's like, because I think there's a good possibility that some teams are going to be able to operate, but they're going to be limited to, like, you can't have more than 10 people in the shop at a time. And so at that point, you might be better off with a smaller team. I'm not saying I don't want anyone kicking people off their team. Like, that's terrible. Imagine how terrible that'd be. It's like, I got kicked off the team because of the coronavirus. Like, that's, not good. But it might be a year where you hold on recruiting a little bit. I don't know. That might not be the answer our friend in chat was looking for, but just let's take it easy. Our health is what matters right now. Got to flatten this curve. We got to stop this out.
That's all we have time for, so thank you so much for your time today.
Well,
your presentation was excellent.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Thanks for everyone who's been involved with this. Team 3132 is the host team here, but I know there's a whole bunch of other teams who've been involved, and thanks to FIRST for supporting this, and thank you for being a great co-host. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right, I can't wait for me to be your co-host, like when you're giving a presentation. I get to ask you the questions.
Thank you. Goodbye.
All right. See you, everyone.